Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan Scott. I'm a longtime editor with the New Quarterly and director of the Wild Writers Mentorship Program. Welcome to our 9th annual Wild Writers Literary Festival, online from Waterloo, Ontario, throughout the month of November. Do we miss hosting you in person? Yes, we do. But we're happy to welcome viewers from across the country and beyond. A special thank you to our festival donors and sponsors. We are incredibly grateful for their support. And thank you also to the volunteers who have made the festival possible. Today's session, Tips for Building Your Community Online, is with the incomparable Isabella Wang, author of 2 poetry collections, On Forgetting a Language with Baseline Press, and Pebble Swing, which is forthcoming next year from Nightwood Editions. Isabella is a particularly beloved author at the New Quarterly after first coming to our attention in an Edna Stabler personal essay contest with a luminous piece that was not only shortlisted, but that marked the debut of the youngest writer we've ever had the privilege of featuring. She went on to be shortlisted in yet another of our contests. She has also been shortlisted for the Malahat Review's Far Horizons Poetry Contest and the Manola Review's inaugural poetry contest. You can find her poetry and prose in more than 30 literary journals, including Bark Poetry Magazine, Carte Blanche, Prairie Fire, and in several upcoming anthologies. She is the editor for issue 44.2 of Room magazine. You will enjoy this session immeasurably. Now I'd like to turn things over to Isabella.
Hello everybody. Can you see me? All right, we'll be working with the screen from my computer then, unless someone can disable my other screen. Sorry, everyone. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Susan. I am forever indebted to the New Quarterly for showing me my first microdose of community. I am very honored to be sharing my Saturday morning with you, gathered here in this space. I am personally have always been very intrigued by the different kinds of micro communities that the Zoom space has afforded every one of us. It's an uncanny time that we live in. And the reason that I have the pleasure of connecting with many of you today, that I wouldn't be able to otherwise if it meant that we all had to gather somewhere in the same venue, city, and time. However, it also means that we are all situated here in our very different, unique settings. I am personally zooming in from the unceded, never surrendered Tsleil-Waututh territories of the Tsleil-Waututh peoples as an uninvited guest. As well, I would like to acknowledge the traditional Coast Salish territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish territories of Vancouver, where I grew up for 9 years of my life as an immigrant settler, and it is a place that I'm still very much getting to know. And lastly, I am also obligated to the territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, Squamish, and Musqueam peoples, where I have the privilege of attending Simon Fraser University and attaining a post-secondary education, where I really fell in love with poetry and writing. And it is a space where I found a lot of my people and communities. Throughout the course of this workshop, we will be working a lot of our way through space, orientation, and different forms of communities. So I want to encourage all of you as well to think about your relation to land, as well as how you situate yourself as a community citizen with regards to the orientation and histories of the spaces that have formed you and the spaces you are in. Now, without further ado, My presentation today will take approximately 40 minutes. What I want to do, however, first is to engage all of you in what I think and what I know is a very individual topic. Because community, in that we are all contributing to them, engages us in very intimate ways. And as this micro workshop is going to show us, community is not just one thing, but it is an ecology of interconnected workings and sums, as well as a horizon. As Sarah Ahmed, one of my favorite writers, writes in this line, the history of bodies can be rewritten as the history of the reachable. Community as a space and trajectory is both, which is why it is crucial. So what I want to do right now is to ask for all of you to close your eyes. And I know that I cannot see all of you in this webinar, but your presence and what we have established in our micro community here is very valuable to me. So I would love it if we could all participate in this and really feel grounded in what is also your space and time, not just mine. So keep your eyes closed, and I'm going to lead you in a short meditation, followed by an individual brainstorming session that will segue into the rest of my presentation. I am just going to pull up, where's the music? There we go. All right. I hope you can all hear this, and please keep your eyes closed. Let us begin by finding a comfortable seated position. You can move yourself to the floor, lie down, but keep your eyes closed and cognizant of the different infrastructures, walls, furniture, object, and the ground bearing beneath you. Begin by noticing your hand and orient it in the same direction as you orient your heart. Now take a deep breath in and listen to your own heartbeat. Listen to it beating in your own chest. Let us rewind. I hope that's better. With each beat, may it remind you of how far you have come this week, this day, this month, and the communities that have helped you get through in these tough and peculiar times. With each beat, may it take you deeper within at this time. With each beat, may it remind you of the spaces you're holding, its weight, the transference of energy, an extension of you. Take a deep breath in through your nose and a long exhalation out, allowing yourself to be rooted in a present, anchoring you. With another heartbeat, let it take you back to a moment in this past week where you felt uncomfortable. Think about the spaces you were in, the situation. Was it yourself or others or both who made you feel that way? Now with another heartbeat, skip back or forward to a moment where you felt at home, however you interpret that. Think about where you were, what you were doing. Was it with yourself or others, or both, that you shared the moment with? Now take a deep breath in, and now exhale. With a new release of energy, redirect your attention onto the space you're in, being aware of the way that its shape, grooves, and curvatures map onto yours. Reorient yourself if need be. Pay attention to the space. Where are you? What is this space for? What memories do you most associate with having in this space? In this space before the pandemic began, and all the ways that it has changed or not changed. Has the functions of the space changed? Has the pandemic changed your perceptions of it? Now take a deep breath in and listen to your own heartbeat. Listen to it beating in your own chest. With each beat, let it remind you of the space you're in and its significance to you. What is your relation to this space? What are some ways that you have crossed paths with this space in the past week, too? Now focus on where you are and pay attention to the other spaces and things that you are allowing to be drawn into the periphery by focusing on the here and now. What other rooms, corridors, sounds, and the rush of the city might you be neglecting by staying in this moment? Now with another heartbeat, imagine it were someone else in this place. Are they older or younger than you? How would they interpret the functions of the space you're holding yourself? How would they define their bodily horizons in relation to here? Would they value it or find different usages for it than yours? Another deep breath in and another deep breath out. Imagine you were the space around you. Place yourself in the perceiving end of the different nooks and crannies and windows and doors and furniture. Pick one object, and what do you see? Now regain your composure. Notice your heart race. Notice your breath, your feelings. And when you are ready, open your eyes. Now, as you are all just coming back, I want to engage all of us in a tiny exercise. And whether you want to do this on paper or just in your head, take a minute and list a series of bullet points that begins with a sentence, "Community starts now." And think about what that means to each and every one of you. And I'll just give us a minute. Okay, deep breath in. Now, I meant to do all of that for a reason. And it is so we can situate ourselves in this work and in our rooms after we have had a kind of resetting into a more Zen-like, peaceful webinar space. And that brings me to my first point: situate yourselves in the community space. By situating ourselves, it is important. It is what we're going to do in this in community building. And I mean situating in terms of being aware of your own time and capacity. What simultaneous responsibilities clock you? What are your own goals and hopes? And is there a space that you can contribute in a community? Or is it a space that you very much need to build yourself? As Margaret Kovach, an Indigenous researcher, writes, we can only interpret the world from the place of our experience. and it shows respect to the ancestors and allows community to locate us. Self-location anchors knowledge within experiences, and these experiences greatly influence interpretations. Situating, aside from being aware of your capacity, your own needs, is also being aware of your own biases and privileges, which is why I asked us to engage in that exercise. Because as I said before, community is not just one thing. We all have different interpretations of community. And for us, that beginning, that start, is all different. Where you are situated, out of respect to our ancestors, our families, our friends and peoples, as well as to the community at large that we are working with, is important. Situating yourself is about being aware of knowing the why you're doing something, if you're the right person for the role. It's about being aware of your own orientation. For example, think about your writing desk. And if it is organized, if it's just as big as you need it, you don't notice it because it's just part of your normal everyday. It is only when a desk starts being wobbly, disorganized, too small or too big for new spaces, that it becomes detrimental for the writer, because we realize that that orientation is askew and it makes us uncomfortable. But some objects, for example, right-handed scissors, are better oriented for some people than others. So are some spaces, a lot of spaces. And every time you start contributing to a community or start building a micro niche, think about the orientation of the space that you wish to contribute with your personal presence. As Maria Kovacs tells us, when we situate ourselves, when we identify from a place of personal history and memories, a need, a lack, and we address that, the need of an individual will often map onto the needs of a common collective. When I first started writing, Wade Compton wrote to me. He wrote, "You will learn that your writing is best when you do not pander, when you follow your own interests, no matter how strange or obscure you suspect they might seem to others. And others will in fact connect with your writing, especially when you go deeper into your own peculiarities," unquote. And those words have stayed with me wherever I went, because this work has to come from the heart. It has to engage you. It has to motivate you. So situate yourselves. Dive into your own interests, your passions. Utilize your special skills. At the same time, consult people when you need to. Reach out and offer opportunities to others when you have the chance. And that's how you will find your people. And that leads me into my next segment, and that is contribute to an existing community space. I have defined it in several points here. There's all kinds of different reading events, workshops. You can submit to an array of journals. A lot of major universities also have a writer in residence program, where it gives you an opportunity to take workshops, attend webinars and seminars by the writer. And I know my personal university has a program where you can also book a time to engage with a writer one-on-one. You can submit to them 5 to 10 pages of work, and they will talk you through it. And again, it's your way of engaging and contributing to a community space. And when I first started writing 2 years ago, I didn't know anybody. It simply took one poet to reach out to me and say, "I am reading at this weekly reading series. Do you want to join?" for me to have found a community of people that I so longed for so long. And from there, it branched out. There are so many opportunities out there that tailors towards so many different interests, genres, as the Wild Writers Festival and many other festivals across the country does so well. Take advantage of that. I'm going to use a personal example here. When the pandemic first started, I was a coordinator for the Dead Poets reading series. And it's usually a bi-monthly reading series that happens in person at the Vancouver Public Library. And when we couldn't do that anymore, we decided to go online and go to YouTube. And it was incredible what submissions and this kind of community that came out of it, this polyphony of voices. The YouTube channel here was not just a replica of a version of the live event, but it was its own thing. Poets who were not, it was the first time that we went international. Poets from South Africa and Russia were reading to us. Poets who were not situated in BC, many of whom who were my friends that I had the pleasure of hearing for the very first time, read to us not just in English, but Italian, Farsi, Mandarin, Zulu. And because of the digital space where we could subtitle, over in English or translate, it was an opportunity to read in another language where it would have been more difficult to do so in person. And it was a beautiful thing that happened when we needed it. I think, however the pandemic has been, it has brought some good changes out of it that is here to stay. And I hope it's here to stay. The online reading event is one, because again, coming back to space, to distance and orientation, there are just some people we love that we don't get to see in person. The digital space is an opportunity to collapse that geographical distance. It's an opportunity of transformation, of reimagining different spaces. And I hope that there will be a version of that in conjunction to us being able to see us again in the soon distant future. And I just prepared also a little slideshow of different writing communities that are started by individual writers, very important community presences that are also really helpful in building. And if you want to get started with engaging in a kind of community space, there's continuing studies workshops at SFU, UFT, many universities for different genres. The Writer Studio at SFU has created a lot of wonderful writers. There's also the Vancouver Manuscript Intensive. Learn Writing Essentials was started by Shalene Knight because she wanted a kind of nurturing environment where writers could gather in their own, safe space to talk, chat, give feedback, and starting her own program was a way to do that for her. As well, Nicole Bright does something similar with her creative writing programs. Just wonderful, I've taken it. And she's also offering free masterclasses on her website. Same thing, Rachel Thompson, Lit Make Love. It's just so dedicated to the community and so dedicated to our writers. And there's so much you can find with just a little research in your own locale, in your own cities. And please do share them. And so I've talked about contributing to a space, but sometimes we need to create our own space. I want to go back to Ahmed's line: the history of bodies can be rewritten as the history of the reachable. Some horizons are more clearly defined than others, because some horizons, some community spaces, might be tailored towards a greater commonality of people, i.e., a group of able-bodied folks attending an event without a wheelchair accessibility ramp. Or I was personally very pissed because there are some of us that started writing very early on. And there was this brilliant reading series that started in Vancouver when I was 17, but it happened at a bar that required ID and for you to be 19 and up. And I felt left out, and I was like, going hello. And so what do you do in these scenarios? You can work towards building a literary event that addresses these individual specific needs. And it is likely that it will help others who are in the same boat as well. Going through some examples, I just had the privilege of interviewing Whitney French and Alana Johnson, who started Hush Harbor Press, a wonderful Black feminist queer press, because there was a need for it. As they voice, our focus is not just to replicate, but dismantle and reimagine this future. It's going to take time. It's going to take patience. It's going to take air. It's going to take all these things, and we are invested in that. Because community, in the same way as writing, it's a world-building activity. You're literally creating worlds. You're literally creating spaces, new spaces to come in. And I think there's always a need for that. Going through another example, I really want to give a shout out to Kathy Stonehouse, because again, there was an individual lack. After the pandemic struck, Peddler Press, as are many independent bookstores and presses, was struggling. And so these writers didn't get a chance to launch their books. The press is also, it's also stopping circulation. And so this was a book, Kathy Stonehouse's own book, The Causes, was a book that she spent 10 years researching and writing. And all of a sudden, what can you do? And so what she did was reached out to a lot of other Peddler Press writers and created a live event and created different kinds of other ways of independently promoting their books. And it was, again, a very beautiful gesture, a very needed one. And so I also want to give this a shout out and encourage you to check out all of these writers' books, attend the event if you can, and give them a little bit of support. Other ways of creating a community space, starting a literary event, so many of them are emerging in the second segment of the pandemic, because I think in the beginning we were all a bit shocked and traumatized. But a lot is coming. Yep.
Are you able to share your screen? I just don't think we can see your presentation.
Oh my God, are you not seeing this?
No, not yet.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so just retracting a bit. Situate yourselves. We have a wonderful line from Margaret Kovach, contributing to an existing community space. And this is a really lovely collage of different voices that contributed to us with the Dead Poets Reading Series. I moved on to writing programs, and we have Shalene Light's Learn Writing Essentials, which I encourage all of you to check out. And so here we have, and so right now I am talking about community spaces, making your own community space. And as I was saying, you can do that by starting a literary event. WordCamp started its own giant thing where it invited different rap artists, different poets, different storytellers to give community workshops and also mentor writers one-on-one. And that was a really wonderful gesture that came out of it as well. Start your literary journal. I'm friends with a couple younger writers who did this. Start your own chapbook press. Pitch to a library or partner about, hosting your own workshop, about an idea you have. And it is very likely that they will be as excited about it as you are. And yeah, and we have Harsh Harbor here as an example. I encourage you to check out Peddler Press. Please do so. And drawing back from a larger gesture, building your community space, sometimes taking into account personal capacity, multiple jobs many of us have. Sometimes, you have to go small. And, a small micro niche community is, a wonderful way to do that. Once when the pandemic started, I was getting in touch with one or two of my writer friends on a weekly basis. And we would catch up, we would read to each other, 500 words of prose or poetry and give each other feedback. We would, with one of my friends, I am learning Farsi and she comes from a Farsi speaking heritage. And together we're translating Farsi poetry. But but sometimes building an online community is about really trusting your intuition and really sticking with the people that you care about, checking in on them, reaching out to ask, hey, do you want to engage in a weekly, catch-up session? Do you want to hold each other accountable and write? Do you want to give each other support? Maybe going big, maybe attending 5 different events in a week, or starting a giant project isn't the thing for you right now. It isn't for a lot of people, but it is possible to go small in whatever way you define it. And I think it is it's another wonderful possibility that could come out of the community space. And I move on now to find your people, because I think as much as publications, readings, getting paid for different gigs is wonderful, and it is a way of connecting. Sometimes, and I admit this, again, situating myself with a full-time course load and multiple jobs, it does get transactional. It does get to a point where you just have to be, okay, I got to get this done. And that is difficult. But at the end of the day, it's the people who pull you back again. You can only go so far, you can only write so far. But if you don't have your people, all you'll be is lonely. At least that's what I found. Network. It's a really effective way of being engaged with the community right now, especially in this time. And I mean network in a couple different ways. Social media is on one hand very effective for getting to know the latest writers, the latest publications, engaging with your friends when, again, engaging with friends and family when you can't really see each other in person. And for me, especially as an emerging writer, especially if you are an emerging writer, I think wanting to know what different opportunities and spaces and people there are, social media is a really effective way to go. But it also takes a lot of time and capacity. And especially again, during the pandemic, what many people need is the opposite of stimuli, news all the time. And so, so there are different ways to network. You don't have to have a personal social media, but you can have a website and share work on that end. If you are a community member, if you are a gatekeeper in some way, if you are editing a journal, again, that is your way of staying connected with the people that matter to you. When I started editing the web content for Room Magazine, it wasn't just a transactional, okay, I'm going to edit this and this gets published. I met some of my closest friends just through that, really personal connection. And so, and so networking again, in the same way as community, because network is its own community space. It has a lot of different definitions that can be tailored to your individual needs. And I also just want to remind you that just because you choose not to have a social media presence doesn't mean that you aren't present. Doesn't mean that, there aren't people who are talking about you. Doesn't mean that your work and commitments and gestures of kindness aren't being commemorated and appreciated. And so as I am moving on from, building different community spaces and contributing, I want to remind you to also be receptive. Because community, in the same way that it is a poem, is very dynamic. Let me just give you an example. When I often talk to a writer about form, I often give the example of taking home a new plant, a plant that comes in sketchy soil that is in a plastic container. And what do you do with it? You have to tilt it very gently out of its current vessel. You have to give it a little massage. You have to then transfer it into a new container, not too big, not too large. Cover it in new soil, in new nutrients if it needs. Water it. Don't water it too much. Don't water too little. You have to place it in a space that has enough sunshine, but not too much. In other words, you have to tailor your space to meet the needs of the plant that you're caring for. And, as someone who has killed tons of plants in my lifetime, as someone who has, revived a lot of plants in my lifetime, it's not something that goes perfectly the first time. Sometimes you need to work with it. And that is the same thing as community. Going back to Harsh Harbor Press in their wonderful interview, and again, I'm so grateful for their words. I asked them a question, they responded, "What does a Black queer feminist press mean to you?" And that is also a big part of Harsh Harbor's allegiance to community. We must ask community what they need. We can't just be on our high hunches and just put out the work that we love. We have to put out the work that the community needs. We have to put out the content that Black folks need, right here, right now, not just accountable, but really committed to the voices of community. And what they did was interviewed a ton of different folks and asked them, what does the Black queer feminist press mean to you? And they got a ton of responses. And this is why in the beginning, I also wanted to ask you, what does community mean to you? Community in the same way that you're contributing or building a community of your own. It's something that grows over time and evolves. And you have to be receptive to that change. If you're contributing, don't be afraid to offer suggestions if something doesn't work, to raise obstacles in the way of you getting access to something, getting access to a certain event. And as a gatekeeper, as someone who is building a community, it's not as effective just putting out there what you think is needed, but also really listen to what is needed. That said, dream big horizons. I talked about going small for a moment, but I think, a lot of us are afraid to overcommit ourselves. A lot of us are afraid to commit to something too big for fear of, what happens if one of us gets sick? What happens if we overcommit? And I think on one hand, that is That is an effective way of situating yourself, and one way of being responsible. Our capacity shouldn't get in the way of us wanting to dream big. Because often what goes into, either editing an anthology, starting a literary event, hosting the Dead Poets reading series online, is that it is huge. It is a huge endeavor, and it takes a lot of people. And so what I want to say is, don't be afraid to dream big, but also don't be afraid to reach out for help, to reach out for support. I was super surprised that when Watch Your Head, an anthology that addresses the ecological crisis, first announced itself online, announced that it's going to have a print anthology out in 1 year. I was shocked because, as many of you guys know, these kind of endeavors takes years. But the anthology itself reflected a very urgent time, a very crucial point I think in our time. And what was required was for it to go out, within a year. But if you look on the back cover, there are like 20 editors, not 20 editors, not including the actual Coach House Press itself, that made this whole thing happen. 20 editors, even more contributors. And that's how you get an anthology out in 1 year. And same with other projects. I think, in a lot of, rigid institutional or academic settings, we were raised to think that, within a group project, you have to commit an equal amount. Everyone has to divide their own work equally in order for it to be fair. But if you take a look back at a lot of, revolutions, events, community events that happened in the past that required a lot of people, often the distribution of work is not even. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? Sometimes dreaming big horizons can mean pitching an idea, can mean going hard and, giving all of yourself to that one project for so long, while being mindful that there are people to support you, while being respectful of their times as well, being respectful of the people that you have onboarded to help you with this project. Because only then, and Emily, I see, I'll wrap up in just a bit. Because only then, can something like this really happen. And I just want to segue really quickly, and I don't have many left. Small practices are impactful. Small. Sometimes an ecology in the community can mean responding to other writers' works. Can mean, reading another poet's work, picking up their books, and responding that way. Toni Morrison, in her library of, I think 2,000 books, has one book where it was an over one's own work. And jumping ahead, please do take care of yourself in whatever form you need. And I want to end with a line. I want to end with this slide, the editors in Zadie Smith's basement. Book out, and how can she possibly do that? And I had one friend make a sarcastic remark being like, Zadie Smith must have And when it's done democratically, it's that blind peer review is vital. But I think when you're just working with someone, it's important, I think, to trust them, to get to know them, because, you know, by engaging in critique, it's also a very personal thing that takes a lot out of you. So I think, yeah, you also want to work with someone who is receptive to your own work, and someone that works well with you, right? So I think, yeah, definitely get to know them and find someone that matches what you're looking for and matches your style and personality.
Yeah, that seems like really, really wise advice from my perspective too. Okay, third question. Do you have any suggestions for the good use of social media versus things that take up too much time and energy?
I mean, there are apps that lets you clock your time on social media. And when you've had your dose, it doesn't let you go on social media anymore. Honestly, it's, you know, in the same way as writing and submitting to journals, you get you know, it's something that you get attuned to over time. You get attuned to your own rhythm about, you know, when it's time to take a break and go on social media, and when it's too busy and you just have to focus. But again, social media is something that you got to keep yourself accountable with. And honestly, like, yeah, you got to keep yourself accountable. Know when it's time to step back. Maybe not take a permanent break, but just take a short break, right? And no one, and you won't be forgotten, I promise you. People will still care about you.
So here's the perfect segue question from that to this next one, which is, do you have tips for getting started on social media if you have been neglectful of your platform for a while? So, you know, transitioning away for self-care or whatever and transitioning back. Just what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, maybe, I mean, it's always wise to listen in first on what's happening before engaging yourself in it. I would say take a look on social media, see if there's, depending on which gadget you're using, right? See if there's any friends, any new folks, any new writing that's come out. You know, if you don't want to engage with someone directly, read their writing. And maybe from there start, you know, nudging your way in if you want to. Maybe message one person individually, or just start posting pictures of your dog. I've seen everything.
Always a safe answer. Just post pictures of your beloved pet, and you're signaling that you're okay. I love that. Okay, here's a question about context. Can you just reflect a bit on trusting the source where to submit your work? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. That is a really good question. Someone
Trusting
submitted
the
that.
source. What do you mean by source?
I think it probably means, it says trusting the source where to submit your work. So my guess is that the person who asked the question is, maybe it's a question about how do you know what recommendations to take, or you know, like every publication has a persona, really, which is its website or its you know, it's the product that is published. But how do you know how to navigate through all those things? So just take us kind of behind the scenes, because you've been submitting for a long time in a really interesting range. So
Well, I mean,
that's my interpretation of the question. Let's run with that.
yeah, I thought it was. I just wasn't sure. But yeah, it's interesting how you say like every journal has a persona, right? And it's exactly that. You know, funny story, my first ever submission was to the New Yorker, and all the other submissions after that were blind because I had no sense of where to submit. I was just like, literary journal, okay. Right. In the same way that you know, a writer progresses over time, in the same way that, you know, a writer, you know, gets the hang of their own work, own style, their own voice. They get better at editing their own work over time. It's something that you adapt yourself to. And I think it's definitely connected to social media or to research. You know, the more you engage with the magazine, the more you read it, the more you subscribe, the more you connect with the writers that are published out of that magazine, the more you connect with the editors, you know, the more you get a sense of how this magazine functions. And over time, what I have found that is that, you know, I just have to think of a magazine that I do really want to submit to. And, you know, the names of the pieces that I think are a right fit for that magazine comes very intuitively to me. Doesn't always mean I get accepted, but I like being intuitive with my work. And that intuition is something you develop over time.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer, because I really appreciate that answer, actually, because I think it is true that the notion that you try to work intuitively, and yet at the same time you don't have control over what's happening on the other end. You know, so there's a kind of resilience, I think, that someone develops, and I just think you're a beautiful example of what that resilience looks like. You know, very open-hearted, very generous, really productive, but also, you know, you keep moving. You keep moving. There's no there's never a note of grievance. Never a note of grievance in your work. It's interesting. Okay, this looks like the last question. You and I are having a good time here. We'll have to wrap up soon, but this looks like the last one that's might have come in. How do you put your ego away as you try to connect with the writing community, especially when some others don't reciprocate?
Yeah, I mean, again, situating yourself, right? I think being aware of what you can let yourself get away with. Again, it's a hard one, but you know, it doesn't hurt to be a good person. It doesn't hurt to be generous and be receptive and give the work out. And it's honestly, it's something that, you know, it almost counter argues itself. And what I mean by that is, you know, yeah, sometimes like the thought of publication, the sound of a words, like yes, blurs your vision. But, you know, I've been corrected at times where, you know, I just realized that, you know, my best work comes from on a place where I'm being most genuine, being myself, not trying to be overtly smart. Because there are instances then where I try to be overtly smart. And it's only afterwards, as I reflect on that work and edit my own work, that I realize, no, my better stuff was when I was being myself and being genuine. And it's the same thing when you're engaging with that community, right? You know, you often realize that, you know, the most beautiful responses, the most beautiful gestures of human connection you can get with a community, either in person or online, is through being, you know, generous and receptive yourself. I think that's what I can say about that one.
Well, that's the last of the questions. So that really, if you have any, I mean, to me, that's a beautiful closing statement. But if you have another closing statement you'd like to make, by all means, do it. And then we'll turn over to me and I'll do a closing statement. But yeah, we'd just love to hear your final thoughts.
Well, yeah, well, I just wanted to thank everybody for being here. And I haven't, it's been a busy week. And so it's really nice to, oh my gosh, engage with so many names here. Oh my gosh, I love you all. Yeah, so see, it feels really, really wonderful. I personally feel really, really channeled by all of your presences here, feeling really supported and good. And I hope that some of the things I said today have resonated with you and will be useful in as you go on to build your literary spaces and build your communities in the months going forward. That's what I have to say.
Beautiful. Thank you. So that was a beautiful presentation, and I'm glad it felt good to you, that you seem filled by it, and the 50 or so people have been able to gather here. I think we've had a really, really remarkable hour, and I hope those of you who were present for this have really had a sense of the depth and humanity of Isabella and the work that she brings, no matter what she's talking about. And you can see that a great deal of work and thought went into this presentation, but the tone and the beauty of it is what I hope you take away, and that deep sense of affirmation and community that she speaks of so naturally. I would encourage you to look for early Isabella Wang by going on the New Quarterly website and searching for her under our blog and web exclusives, and you'll find some of her early work. Her chapbook can be purchased online from Wordsworth Books in Waterloo, and you can visit the Q&A window of your screen to find the link, or you can visit wildwriters.ca. Or of course, you can order it from your favorite retailer. That's from Baseline Press. Beautiful, beautiful press. This session has been brought to you free of charge. However, if you would like to support the festival by visiting the donate link on our website, that would be appreciated too. And then you would come up in the list of donors and sponsors that we support, that have supported us and that have made this possible. This session has been recorded and will be available throughout the rest of the month, so you can review it at your leisure. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Isabella in particular, to the fabulous New Quarterly team, Wild Writers team that makes this possible behind the scenes. And thank you everyone for your support throughout this entire season. Take care.